Every little bit helps. This week, of course, we're still following the piracy of Robert Richard, House of Larson, United States. And things seem to be coming down the pike at law enforcement without them being able or capable of seeing what's coming upon them at the behest of corporate counsel. This week alone, we've seen a surge in arrests and allegations against law enforcement. We've seen a surge of deaths since October of law enforcement. We've seen law enforcement departments shut down completely. They're gathering them up in droves, such as a cattle drive. 30 more officers the other day. This is just absolutely appalling to see. I know that there are some guilty individuals that have been perpetrating crimes against humanity, but these are normally trained at Quantico. They are FBI agents, even if they have a different name, such as detective. In my travels, in my walk, I've known numerous law enforcement. From my childhood, I was inside of child trafficking, and I experienced horrifying things at the behest of, quote, law enforcement. And on the flip side, I've met so many good guys. And when, as Jesus said, you grow up. When I was a child, I thought like a child, and at some point in time, you grow up and you start delving into these things. And why do they happen? What causes them? Why are these things occurring? Who is doing this? And this is the point we're at now. Watching law enforcement being taken into the chute. First of all, by court process, they're required to have low IQs. That was a court decision back in, I believe it was 1999. And the courts decided that law enforcement agencies from that point forward would not be able to hire law enforcement with IQs over 120, I think it was 119. No, lower than that. It was around 100 because it was almost to the point of mental retardation. Retardation, of course, has an IQ of 73, 75, around there. And the drive to be law enforcement or to be military is usually maintained by being raised by a single mother, looking for a father figure, seeking that father figure. And as law enforcement realizes, females do the same thing. Little girls that have their father ripped away from them end up dating older men. They end up going for that older guy because they're always seeking that father figure. And the male equivalent is either military or law enforcement, seeking that father. There's a rarity. I've known a couple males without a father figure that went into the priesthood. They were seeking a father figure in the church setting. Now, all of these things are designed by capacity building projects, such as Pyongyang, that infiltrated Illinois specifically with the Korea, Illinois project, and was deployed in the schools back in the 1980s. Any child growing up in the 80s, 90s, and now into the 2000s has been exposed to Korea, North Korea, being raised as, quote, a North Korean citizen. This is what you are exposed to in the educational system. This is what you're exposed to in the media. This is what you're exposed to in all realms of living. That is what the Pyongyang project is. It is a capacity building venture, concept building. These things build concepts in the mind and promote to you artificial intelligence, designed, of course, by the producer, the Central Intelligence Agency on behalf of the United States Incorporated, by which to retard human beings. You're not going forward, you're going backwards. You're not going sideways, you're going backwards. You're being taught through education to devolve and not evolve. Now, the history on commerce and navigation, when you go back to the origins when we were all kidnapped and we were all transported through commerce and navigation, it was under such as the British East Indian Trading Corporation. This moved over here, of course, in the United States Incorporated to be the Department of Transportation. Now, the International Commission of Transportation is actually the Commission International of Transportation, CIT, and you can find that if you go looking for it. And it is run by the American Bar Association. The House of Delegates has full control over the American Bar Association. And of course, the House of Delegates is the lower chambers of the House of Representatives, sitting in West Virginia, Virginia, and New Hampshire. At the head of these things, of course, the number 2 pedophile, predator of children, Patrick Leahy. And you can go to such as the Library of Congress and look these things up. You can find what committees and commissions these Congress members are sitting on. You can find out what they're doing to human beings, how they cash in on these things, and how they prey not only on the citizen, but also on law enforcement as they pit us up against each other. That's why we are here teaching. This is Leaving the Farm. This is what we do. I do have a special guest scheduled to come on in a little while. I want to get into some media concepts, foreign relations. Each county is defined as a foreign state as per 28 U.S.C. subsection 1603. They are a corporation. That is what a foreign state is. Foreign policy, foreign affairs, refers to communication between those counties, not interstate. This is foreign affairs, foreign commerce, foreign trade. Now, when you go to the Bar Association on the Commission International de Transportation, and you can find that at www.cit-rail.org. Of course, these stem from the Railroad Acts, from, of course, none other than Congress. Now, when you're looking at what the media is, the first thing I urge everybody to do is to go to bbg.gov, which is the Broadcasting Board of Governors. Click on their About page. And in the About section, it maintains that the Broadcasting Board of Governors has international control of all civil media. When you go farther into their state, into their site, you can see how they made propaganda legal again. For example, last year with the Smith-Month Modernization Act. It says they can wave a flag at you and tell you things that are not really truthful, but are propaganda, and they can indoctrinate you by repetition. That is the action of indoctrination. In means in, doc means to teach, trin means 3 times. Indoctrination is to teach you these things 3 times, wherein you're indoctrinated. And if you'd like to read more about the use and application of education or pedagogy, you can find that in the Treatise on Education, otherwise known as Emile, E-M-I-L-E, by Rousseau. And I urge everybody to read that. It will show you step by step how the human being is broken by education. Pedagogy, of course, means attendance on males. Now, the target is the male. You are being modified as to your behavior. The female, we're impulsive. I buy everything. Until I learn logic and until I learn discernment, I buy into everything. Oh, that's shiny. Whoo! All of these things. That's what the female does. But the male doesn't do that. He has to be modified by usually such as Pavlov's way, or Carl Jung defines it as learned behavior. And in this, he has to be, quote, spanked over and over again. Taught that he's a bad boy, spanked with child support, spanked with a speeding ticket, spanked with charges of all kinds. And if he is not maintaining as to the product, corporate counsel is going to sick something upon him to modify his behavior. Now, when you go to the citrail.org, make sure you click on the EN, which means English, by the way, if you're English speaking and reading. Now, corporate counsel sits in these local communities, and they direct law enforcement. They also direct each and every department. So if a male needs to be spanked for child abuse, the principal agent at a school will accuse him of child abuse. Doesn't necessarily mean that he's abused, right? Absolutely not. The principal agent at the school has it one function. They're a principal agent on behalf of corporate counsel. We've talked more in depth on the educational system in the prior audios, and you can find those at Rev's YouTube site as well as Bono's Entertainment and my channel, TammyK23. Corporate counsel has a lot to account for. They're not only killing human beings, they're now killing cops. They're now vilifying cops. And in one article today in the New York Times, quote, at New Brooklyn's district attorney's door, a tidal wave of wrongful conviction cases. Their wrists uncuffed, their ankles unchained. Antonio Yarbo and Sheriff Wilson walked out of a Brooklyn courtroom Thursday afternoon, after more than 2 decades in prison for 3 brutal murders they never committed. Convicted of stabbing and garroting Mr. Yarbo's mother, 12-year-old sister, and another 12-year-old girl to death in 1992 when Mr. Yarbo was 18 and Mr. Wilson was 15. Both men had their convictions vacated on Thursday after prosecutors said newly discovered evidence created substantial reasonable doubt of the defendant's guilt, as Assistant District Attorney Mark Held told the judge. Last year, testing revealed that DNA under Mr. Yarbo's mother's fingernails matched that found on another murder victim in 1999 when the men had already been in prison for years. Free of the courtroom, Mr. Yarbo knelt to pray, his hand clasped over a black office chair. It feels good, he said, to be vindicated. There were just 2 prisoners of many who had pinned their hopes on Kenneth P. Thompson, the new Brooklyn District Attorney. Mr. Thompson inherited a mass-ticing wrongful conviction scandal in which dozens of imprisoned men have asked for freedom. Their convictions linked to mistakes and misconduct by police and prosecutors. Little more than a month after taking office, amid promises to restore justice to those wrongfully convicted, Mr. Thompson is confronting the possibility that the violence of the drug-plagued 80s and early 90s bred a wave of wrongful convictions that could dwarf other exoneration scandals. In the 80s and 90s, the media was promoting Miami Vice and all of these shows to present to you all of these drug crimes, murders, and all of these things. And in the mind, what was created in the mind of law enforcement and citizens alike was that citizens were doing these things. Now, throughout my walk, I have evidence that FBI does these things. And the Lord God does these things, such as the story of Job in the Bible. It says expressly what the Lord God likes to do upon human beings, especially when it has a judge coming down from a hill and telling you that you are stealing everybody's wives and asses, killing each other, whereby the 10 Commandments were maintained. Human beings don't do that in their nature. They don't have a natural predator. However, through human modification, human behavior modification, they now do it. It's called an attorney. An attorney means somebody paying homage to the Lord God or landlord. That attorney also twists things. Psychiatry twists things, twists words, twists evidence, twists and turns and creates concepts in the mind to promote division, to divide and conquer. And again, to all law enforcement, study the Civil War. The federal state did this very thing once before as it pit citizens and law enforcement against each other, as it pit black and white, red and yellow, black and yellow, black and white, brown and white, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. These media presentations are there in a human behavior modification program known as capacity building ventures. I urge everybody to go to citrel.org and read more about that. Now, going back to foreign relations, the communication between two, quote, states. The acts of enablement, of course, stemming from the 1802 Indemnification Convention, created commission states on behalf of, quote, government. Now, the Association of Corporate Council Leadership page indicates their chair is Royal Bank of Canada. Vice chair, Golden State Food Corporation. Treasurer, Anheuser-Busch. Secretary, Qualcomm. Director, the Brookings Institute. Another director, Prudential Insurance Company of America. FMC Technologies Incorporated. Lockheed Martin Space Systems Company. Capital Power Corporation. The Estee Lauder Companies Incorporated. The Vertical Screen Group of Companies. Senior Vice President General Counsel of NetApp is on there. Office Depot. Southern California Gas Company. Canon Solutions America. Whirlpool Corporation. American University. Gulf Bridge International. Reckitt Benckiser Group, PLC. Mayo Clinic. Morgan Franklin Corporation. Walgreen Company. Microsoft Corporation. Thomson Reuters. Tutor LLC, YourKidVid.com. Churchill Downs Incorporated. The Hershey Company. USA Track and Field. Lists Jeanette Weinberg as an attorney. And of course, the ex officio president and CEO of the Association of Corporate Counsel is Veta Richardson. Now, let's go to, these are foreign states, as defined by 28 U.S.C. subsection 1603. This is the government that you're patronizing. They maintain all of the foreign states. Now, when you have communication between one or more foreign states, this is called foreign relations. So we go to the CFR, the Council of Foreign Relations. Member list starts out with Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, Chevron Corporation, ExxonMobil Corporation, Goldman Sachs, Hess Corporation, J.P. Morgan Chase and Company, McKinsey and Company, NASDAQ. President's Circle includes Alcoa Incorporated, American Express, Barclays PLC, BlackRock Incorporated, Bloomberg LP, BP, Bridgewater, SIA Technologies, Citigroup, Coca-Cola Company, Credit Suisse, Dell, Deutsche Bank, DimeCorp, Eni, Fortress, Golden Tree, Guardsmart, Kingdom Capital Investment, Kohlberg, Kravis, Robertson Company, Lazard, Lockheed Martin Corporation, Mars Incorporated, McGraw-Hill, MetLife, Moody's Corporation, Morgan Stanley, New Media Investments, NRG Energy. And if you look up NRG, you'll find that they're the corporation for New Jersey. I had dealings with them last year. Parsons Corporation, Reliance Industries Limited, Shell Oil Corporation, Soros Fund Management, Standard Chartered Bank, Toyota Motor North America, Veritas. Premium members, Ace Limited, Airbus, Allied World Assurance Company, American International Group, Anglo-American PLC, Apollo Management, Aramco Services. You get the gist of this? CFR, of course, is neck and neck and hand in hand with the Broadcasting Board of Governors. Now, the treasurer, or the United States Treasury is a clearinghouse to discharge congressional bankruptcy. On the Broadcasting Board of Governors sits John Forbes Carey. He's one of the board members. So here they have this all sewn up in this corporate governance that's using you as a stock option, backing stock. Your productivity, called the Devonshire Participation Program, allows you the privilege to maintain corporations on corporate welfare, to make sure that corporations never go homeless and never go hungry. This is the function of law enforcement. You are law enforcement for corporations. You are enforcing policy, which is corporate policy, in a mutual venture of commerce and navigation, human trafficking, genocide, maintained by corporate policy. The word policy stems from the two words, poly, meaning many, and side, meaning to kill. Policy means to kill many. Human trafficking, genocide, and all of these things are also known as human husbandry. This is a farm. Colony, the word colony stems from the word farm or landed estate. The original 13 colonies did not exist as a landmass. Congress came in and said they represented them. And then Congress shook its own hand and pledged and charged the United States of being to discharge congressional bankruptcy. Bankrupt states. Depraved is another word for bankruptcy. Criminal. Felon. And when somebody's maintaining that another is bankrupt, they're maintaining that they're civilly dead. They've abjured the realm, and they've limited rights and abilities. That is what they did to human beings in the 12th article of the Articles of Confederation. Confederacy in Black's Law Dictionary is defined as a criminal enterprise. The very last line in Black's Law, first edition, says, "See federal government," and refers to such criminal enterprise. This is always under the Acts of Commerce and Private Acts, as defined by 28 U.S.C. Chapter 97, the Foreign Sovereign Immunities Act. A sovereign state is one adhering to the public law, meaning do no harm. A foreign state is a corporation acting under Acts of Commerce and Private Acts, 28 U.S.C. subsection 1603. A foreign state has no sovereignty and is without immunity, according to the Foreign Sovereign Immunities Act, 28 U.S.C. Chapter 97, and the restrictive principle of sovereign immunity. As a foreign state, they can have a lien against it. A public state or sovereign state, they can't have a lien against it because they've never harmed a human being. There's to be no arrest, no charges, no pledging of a human being that has never harmed a human being. Period. End of story. When you go into the shipping code, 46 U.S.C., you'll find this stated again. 46 U.S.C. 3, subsection 313.25 maintains that a public vessel cannot have a lien on it. And if one would like to put a lien on it, keep it there. If they're caught maintaining that lien, they're voluntarily assuming the charges. This means if you've falsely accused somebody and charged them with rape or molestation, or if you've laid a bond down as a judge against a sovereign state, you're voluntarily assuming those charges because you were in the action of shipping, otherwise known as commerce, navigation, human trafficking, and genocide. And these things will be dealt with accordingly. Going back to the law enforcement that is taking the fall and the brunt of corporate councils doing, this is not tolerated by the United States. We know who's innocent and who's not by your own works and actions. To all law enforcement, their criminal acts are in their acts. Each and every act that Congress passes is criminal. Their criminal actions are also in Code of Federal Regulations, maintaining acts of commerce and private acts. The private acts, of course, are executive orders. Anytime a judge maintains an order of his own volition or her own volition, that's an executive order. Every time a governor maintains an order of their own volition, that's an executive order, a private act. These things are unlawful on their faces. 27 CFR 72.11 maintains that commercial crimes are any crime against the laws of revenue. They're not talking about crimes against human beings. The definition says these are crimes against the laws of revenue. Meaning if a human being is doing that, they're undercutting the federal government. This is normally defined as such as the mafia, rather than calling it Congress. Now, this criminal enterprise has been getting away with this for a very, very long time, and we've had enough of this. We've had enough of this. Hopefully I'll have a guest coming on soon as well. Tonight we're just getting warmed up. I'm so, oh my goodness, today it has been overwhelming, the amount of fall guys that have been taken into the system at this time, including some that are guilty. But I'm not seeing, excuse me, any corporate counsel attorneys on here. So far, I'm seeing little guys. I'm seeing an attorney charged with DUI. I'm seeing attorneys charged with robbing gas stations and all of these things. But I'm not seeing any corporate counsel attorneys being arrested. And those are the ones that are directing all of these things. They direct these kidnappings. They direct these divisive things. They direct the fall guy to be the law enforcement officer. They direct rape of children, molestation of children, putting them elsewhere. Today on NBCPhiladelphia.com, PA lawmaker charged with corruption scheme to secretly pay sister, says the DA. Pennsylvania Representative J.P. Miranda of Philadelphia has been charged in a corruption scheme to funnel money to his sister, the city's district attorney announced on Monday. Okay, I'll stop here for a second and tell everybody right now to go look at Joseph Biden, and you'll find some secrets there that are pretty profound when it comes to Jilly Biden and what's in her name. Now, Joseph Biden, of course, is the vice president of the United States Incorporated. And in this, he's been pushing this Obamacare and nationalized health care, all of these things. And this is after he authored the Violence Against Women Act, by the way, that preys on women and children. But Jilly Biden has her hand in a lot of stock in the medical industry. But it's in her name, so you don't see it. And I urge everybody to go ahead and research those things, and you'll find out why nationalized health care and Obamacare is so nice for Joseph Biden and his cohorts and others engaged in the criminal enterprise. Of course, the medical industry is designed to kill people, and it does efficiently and effectively without causing much damage, according to the descriptive introduction to the silent weapon, which of course is the concept creation. Being able to create concepts in your mind, diagnosis after diagnosis. And I'll continue reading from NBCPhiladelphia.com. The alleged scheme began after Miranda, 34, tried to hire Wilson, 28, as his chief of staff. Williams said the Democratic State Caucus denied the appointment because of their family ties. Well, yeah, that's nepotism. To get around the caucus nepotism rules, the state representative allegedly worked out a deal with Timothy Duckett, who worked as a driver on Miranda's campaign. Duckett agreed to take a job in Miranda's office with the sole purpose of giving a portion of his pay to Wilson, Williams said. He was then hired as a legislative aide in December 2012. Duckett was told he did not have to work 40 hours a week for Miranda's legislative office. Miranda also told Duckett that he would only be expected to drive Miranda to different locations when called upon to do so. Duckett was instructed not to sign in at the state representative's North Philadelphia office, and in turn spent his days at a city auto body shop, prosecutors said. In early December, Duckett began paying hundreds of dollars to Wilson, prosecutors said. Each payment, which ranged from $300 to $900, was detailed in a ledger kept by Duckett and signed by Wilson each time payment was provided, court documents show. After making the first payments, Duckett allegedly complained to Miranda that he could not afford his own expenses after giving cash to the sister. Prosecutors say the representatives then gave Duckett a $10,000 raise, bringing his pay to $36,000. In all, Wilson allegedly took $2,600 in cash from Duckett. Although Wilson was barred from working on Miranda's staff, Williams said she still acted as if she ran the representative's office. But his sister still in many ways exhibited dominion, control over the legislative office and policies of State Representative Jose Miranda, the DA said. Despite the evidence provided to the grand jury in Duckett's testimony, both Miranda and Wilson repeatedly lied to the grand jury investigating the case, prosecutors said. Miranda represents PA's 197th legislative district, which covers parts of North Philadelphia, East Falls, and Strawberry Mansion. He was first elected to the PA House of Representatives in November of 2012. He spent time working for Philadelphia Council President Darrell Clark and a spokesman for the PA Senator Shirley Kitchen, according to his biography. Miranda and Wilson each stand charged with one count of conflict of interest, conspiracy to commit conflict of interest, and perjury, all felonies. If found guilty, the duo could spend up to 17 years in prison and face a $35,000 fine. And this one is quite profound because the sheeple apparently are taking this one. Quote, the representative will continue to hold his seat until he resigns, his term expires, or he is convicted of a crime, state officials said. What's funny is that these are like white-collar crimes. Most lawmakers, most Congress members dabble in child predation. their laws, as they're written, are privacy laws, allowing children to be preyed on. Now, there was a Cash for Kids scandal, and most people have probably seen the headline on that one, in Pennsylvania, where 2 judges were found guilty of selling children to juvenile justice programs and other arenas, foster care, adoption industries, and other pedophile networks. But the individuals that they sold them to were never charged. Now, they took money in exchange for child sex trafficking. The child sex traffickers were never charged. One of them pled guilty. The child sex traffickers were never charged. The judges maintained gag orders and other legal mechanisms to sweep all of this off of the table and sweep it out of the mind of the sheeple. The ones actually messing with the kids, raping and molesting them, were never charged. This big show was put on. You saw these judges. I want to see the psychiatrists that were breaking the children and diagnosing the children to get them into juvenile justice. I want to see the detectives that were, quote, investigating and allowing these children to be sold into other child predation networks. I want the industry shut down, and I will not tolerate anything less. I'm not asking anybody to bend over backwards and do anything amiss. I'm asking law enforcement to enforce the law. And if you do not, you will continue to not see your retirements. You will continue to not be paid out of the U.S. Treasury because they no longer have access to the main Treasury if you watch the mainstream media. And they no longer have access to the International Monetary Fund for special drawing rights for protecting anybody because you're a predator. If you continue to prey on women, men, and children, you will continue to be cannibalized by your peers. I'm sure that some are considering that they would be offered immunity. Absolutely not. 28 U.S.C. Chapter 97. We're not going to use children for banking. We're not going to use men and women for banking. We're not going to be using grandparents for banking. We're not going to be killing anybody else anymore, because you will be held accountable. Now, for all the bankers out there, you're being used as a fall guy for these judges. Court, defined in Black's Law Dictionary, is a bank. You're just a representation. As you human traffic, those certificates of deposits are bets against the human production value. Those certificates are the thing that represents a prisoner in a prison. And as you cash in on that, you will be held accountable if you have knowledge. At money.cnn.com, SAC Capital's Mark Toma found guilty. The federal jury in New York Thursday found former SAC Capital portfolio manager Matthew Martoma guilty of charges related to insider trading. He faces up to 45 years in prison and remains free on a $5 million bond. Martoma was charged with 2 counts of securities fraud and conspiracy to commit securities fraud. He was accused of obtaining inside information about the drug stocks Allen and Wyeth, now owned by Pfizer, which is also a publicly traded corporation, PFE. Any publicly funded or publicly traded corporation is the United States Incorporated. That's the thing that human beings have been backing as stock options since 1933, when Congress declared itself bankrupt and came in as the trustee over its own bankruptcy. It said, well, heck, since we have a whole bunch of farm animals here, might as well roll with it. Through education, law enforcement has been dumbed down and educated with patriotism and heraldry, saluting a flag. It's a pirate flag for all those that maintain that they know admiralty law. Sure as heck don't if you're still patronizing that thing. You know what that means? It means we're at war. You're under the bar. All of these things will come to light, and all of these entities will be held accountable for human trafficking and genocide against the human being. Now we're seeing a major difference in, quote, domestic violence cases brought about by the Violence Against Women Act that Joseph Biden authored, which of course is a privacy law by which to prey on human beings. The change we're seeing now is that it's not being used. Why isn't it being used? March 8th of 2013, the United States Incorporated voluntarily withdrew itself from the International Monetary Fund based on its works and actions and cannot receive special drawing rights any longer. You can get paid out of the Treasury if you protect human beings. From www.sfgate.com, San Francisco, of course, officer charged with assaulting girlfriend, Frederick, Maryland. Authorities are releasing more information about Frederick, police officer charged with second-degree assault in Garrett County. Frederick News Post reported in its Thursday edition that 28-year-old Benjamin Whitmore is charged with assaulting his live-in girlfriend. I don't see any mention of domestic violence there. Now, what Joseph Biden had done was he developed, along with his cronies, a privacy law called the Violence Against Women Act. This allowed children and females to be human trafficked through the system. They could hide out, quote, hide out in a domestic violence shelter, and not even a subpoena, not even a warrant could enter into those walls. Throughout the years, and I had experience in fathers' rights and men's rights, and I was seeing all of these females taken off with their kids and falsely accusing males, and then the trail ended. The female disappeared and the children disappeared. And then I found the underground, such as Faye Yeager's murder venue. And I found out why females were being murdered in order to get their kids off of them swiftly, while still leaving the impression in the father's mind and in the community's mind that mom was the one that ran off with them. She would enter into these domestic violence shelters and be offered by attorneys the ability to change her name and social security numbers and that of the children. At that point in time, she was offed quickly, killed, and the children were sold to legislators, judges, psychiatrists, through the system. You can find this. Everything's written. That's what the whole game is. Getting to the inheritance before you can. And to do that, the action of bail is used by which to hold your children hostages to redistribute your estate before it can ever be one. If they take the kids' college fund and your house and everything else, what do you have left? Nothing. You have to start over. That's industrialization. If you burn something to the ground, it can be built again. And over and over and over and over, human beings are being raised by corporate governance by which to maintain corporations on welfare. until now. Now back to sfgate.com. The Frederick News Post reported in its Thursday edition that 28-year-old Benjamin Whitmore is charged with assaulting his living girlfriend. This is something so profound to see, because this female is actually being viewed as a human being. She could be assaulted now. Before that, she was just used as an object. Domestic violence allowed the prosecuting attorney to rake in, at the inception, $6,000 right off the bat. And as I experienced in my own experience when I was attempted on, I was then left as bait, because they played catch and release with him, made him really, really pissed off by handing me a 2-year restraining order that I didn't ask for, that took his medical license, all licenses, including a medical license, and his rights. And they kept him in jail for, 2 months? And then they let him out so he can come get me again and make sure that this time he killed me. This is what their function is. This is what these monster attorneys do. They use human beings as fodder. We're animals on a farm. That's in 7 USC. You can find the definitions of an animal, including man. And when you patronize this thing, when you act with it, when you engage with it, when you love it and pledge allegiance to its flag, you're commiserating with the known enemy of humankind. If you're helping it, you're aiding and abetting the known enemy of humankind, and you will be held accountable, because they have been found guilty of genocide by the evidence. All of these things are located. I would go to Bono's Entertainment on YouTube. It's just easier, ease of access to get there and just start watching. There's so many stories today. I mean, I'm just like mind-boggled at this time to see how many cops are being taken into the shoot and everything else. And there's another one where the attorney, and I need all law enforcement to hear me now. When these attorneys step in to defend you, they're solidifying the judgment against you by cognitive judgment. You need to go look that up. And I know that you're required to have low IQs. That means you haven't been indoctrinated as much as others, so it's not like you're stupid. You just have less indoctrination, and you have less concepts in your mind. Charged officer's attorney tells more about BSL shooting. This is on www.wwaytv3.com. Wilmington, North Carolina. A day after a Southport police officer turned himself in on a voluntary manslaughter charge, his lawyer speaking out. Attorney James Payne says Detective Brian Vassy handled the situation that ended in an 18-year-old Keith Vidal's death the best he could. Payne says Vassy acted honorably on January 5th when he shot and killed the schizophrenic teen in Boiling Spring Lakes. Payne said a body mic on one of the other officers reveals what he believes really happened that Sunday afternoon. He says at some point during the struggle, Vassy saw Vidal make a stabbing motion with a pick towards BSL officer John Thomas that was blocked. The next blow comes back as we described it to Judge Hooks. There was nothing blocking that pick from Officer Thomas's head, Payne said. Payne also said that Vassy at no point said, quote, "I don't have time for this, tase him," as Vidal's father has claimed. Payne says moments after the fatal shot was fired, Vassy spoke to Thomas about what had just happened. Quote, Detective Vassy says to Detective Thomas, and it's caught on video as well, quote, "I had no choice." And Officer Thomas said, I know, Payne said. Southport Police Chief Jerry Dove says he is meeting with District Attorney John David in the next few days to discuss Vassy's employment. Right now, though, he says Vassy is still on paid leave. Now, before an officer goes out to these incidents, Who is he talking to? He's talking to corporate counsel. He's got dispatch in his ear, who has corporate counsel in her ear. Who's making you angry? Who's putting you into fear just before you arrive on scene to protect human beings? It is corporate counsel. We call them your handlers because that's what they're doing. They're handling you. When you're being fed fear-mongering and somebody tells you, a law enforcement officer, that you are entering into a dangerous situation, there's an armed and dangerous felon or whatever else, your instinct is to go into self-defense. Your adrenaline starts rushing. All of these things begin to occur. And that level of fear increases and increases as dispatch is in your ear, as corporate counsel is in your ear. Now, this last year, we've seen so many law enforcement officers taking the fall for these murders, when in reality it's corporate counsel in your ear setting you up just before you arrive on scene. I witnessed this when I was still in Washington State. There was a mentally retarded teenager, Otto Zem, and quote, an anonymous caller called in to say that he looked suspicious at the ATM, whatever, cops came in. It was eventually considered a murder as he was tased to death. But why did they use such excessive force? I don't believe that their intent was to just tase a mentally retarded man to death. Although the ME did say that it was murder, I think they were put into fear by corporate counsel, by dispatch, by the psychiatrist in their ear. And I'm here to listen. I'm here to evidence these things. I'm here to ensure that the truth is always made known. We only adhere to the public law, which is actually the Word of God, simply the truth. That's all it's about. We don't want consensus reality. We don't want something fed to you. We don't want something fed to me. I'm not here to indoctrinate anybody. We're here to get to the truth. And if you are innocent, you are innocent. Your works and actions evidence these things. As we see all of this cannibalism occurring, I do not want useful idiots to be charged for anything, or innocents to be charged for anything. I want to see corporate counsel in the media. I want to see corporate counsel being charged. I want to see more psychiatrists being charged for rape of children. Because that is who is raping them. That is who is abusing them. I want to see more judges charged with child pedophilia and pornography. I want their catalogs taken off the internet as they traffic our children that are stolen off of us through the use of child protective services. And if you want that report, Nancy Schaefer did a report to Congress about the corruption of child protection. And only a few years later, she was murdered in April of 2010, 1 month before they attempted on me. The year before that, they killed George Zaidkhan and made up a nice presentation to show the sheeple, maintaining that he was a villain. He was teaching sheeple compulsive behavior, or why you feel compelled to do the things that you do. As a psychologist at the University of Georgia. As of last year, they were still redistributing his estate, using his children under action of bail by which to garner that estate. The attorneys are cashing in from the front and the back end of everything that happens to you and I, including getting us pit against each other. That is called divide and conquer. That will also no longer be tolerated in any way, shape, or form. It is time now to stand as one. Hi, and welcome back to the second hour of Leaving the Farm right here on Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, where information never sleeps. We are a listener-supported radio station where if you'd like to donate, please visit us at www.freedomslips.com and click on our support pages. Every little bit helps. We're doing pretty good for this month, but your support is what keeps us on the air. I'm not corporate funded. I'm not federally funded. We're not told what to say or censored in any way. Although we do try to keep the station a family-centered station. And of course, we're not going to be using foul language, especially since we've been on iHeartRadio now, and of course, the Live 365 with the new setup that Hawk has done. And of course, we hosts cannot thank him enough for keeping us on the air, cannot thank you enough for supporting our efforts in this. I do have a special guest with me. I've got Bo from the Bo and Rocko Show on Revolution Radio Studio B every Wednesday, 10 to midnight. How are you, Bo?
Okay, a Studio A actually, every Wednesday night, same as usual, and
sorry.
Here we are again, back at it. Thursday on Leaving the Farm. Great information. I think people need to really, as well as law enforcement, need to see what's behind the curtain. If you're talking about Association of Corporate Counsel, these are your board of commissioners in your hometown, or, they're the top attorney dogs on the scene. Only you never see them on the scene because they're always in the shadows working behind the scenes.
Right, and we've seen this here. I mean, just the most egregious things. Law enforcement firing on citizens immediately when they hit the scene. Immediately. I think one of them was within 40 seconds. That indicates that somebody scared that officer to the extent that he felt everybody's life was in danger, even prior to assessment. So they're not allowed to assess the situation anymore. They're completely directed by corporate counsel attorneys, psychiatrists who are provoking and prodding them along, although the officer is the one being charged with these things.
Yeah, fall guys. You said it all the first hour. They purposely get them in there with the lowest IQ possible just to be good robots, basically, for the corporation, for that Federal Reserve system of discharging congressional bankruptcy at the citizen's demise.
Right, and the officer. I mean, if you go back to the 1929 Geneva Convention, Article 21, it maintains that officers, and that includes court officers and who we're seeing going to the chute right now, officers in the military, they're all prisoners of war under corporate governance, according to Article 21 of the 1929 Geneva Convention. And their estates are being held for them on their behalf as well. And a lot of them, they've got military backgrounds. Same thing. You get out of the military, you file your DD-214 right away at the county recorder's office. That's recording a deed. You're becoming property rather than a military employee again. And these things are very, very disheartening and concerning for me because I don't want the Civil War to occur again. The Civil War didn't affect Congress. It never affected Congress. It didn't affect judges. It was just killing and culling citizens against citizens and law enforcement against citizens.
Right. Congress just sat back and watched the activity and cashed in.
And Congress promoted racism. When black people didn't have rights, it was the lawmakers that took them away. It wasn't the citizenry. Making slavery legal is what a lawmaker does. A citizen cannot make slavery legal. I can't go to my neighbor and say, well, heck, today slavery is legal, so come on over and clean my house for me. You can't do that. Only lawmakers can enact laws such as those things while they're pointing the finger at you and I and telling us we're racist. And the same thing happened again at the turn of the last century, the 1900s. It was a Democrat who came in developing the KKK, the Ku Klux Klan. And at that time, the Democratic Party was a conservative party. They were appearing as a Republican. However, it wasn't until 1938 when the paradigm shift occurred, and after that, the Republican Party became the Republican Party as you know now, and the Democrats were the liberals. And of course, the Democrats who created that at the turn of the century came in the 1960s to then create programs to fix what they had created, and they pocketed all those funds. Affirmative action, all of those things.
Civil
rights, all of it, because they're the only ones that take away our rights. When you take away a right by lawmaking ability and then sell it back to somebody, that is the action of bail. You've stolen something off of them, off of their vessel, and now you're selling it back to them, or you're asking them to pay a ransom to get it back. That is piracy. It's always been piracy. It's just now piracy is so perverted in the mind. Now you can pirate movies and music, things like that. That's not piracy. That's a new concept created by concept designers who are psychiatrists, creating in the mind all of these illusions. No, it's not us, Congress. It must be the citizen or law enforcement. And it's sickening to watch as these law enforcement officials are being cannibalized left and right.
Well, look, everybody out there, it seems like, that has a question, they're saying it's too complicated. I don't understand. What are you guys talking about as admiralty and codes and all that? And what are you claiming that stuff for? No, we're not claiming that stuff. We didn't claim that stuff at all. I mean, let's put it in simplistic terms here. This is about as simple as it can get. We only adhere to the public law, which says to do no harm. Okay? If you want to adhere to all the codes, statutes, regulations, 6 million of them, some crazy number like that, these lawmakers have basically imposed upon you to more easily plunder your vessels. That's basically feeding off of you, the citizen. We didn't claim any of that. We let them claim all these things and run us through the hamster wheel. I mean, people that are asking me this stuff, they haven't read the court case.
No.
I mean, that's why I try to read as much as I can on YouTube, on the shows, because people just will not read. I don't know why. I guess the society is just dumbed down to that point, and that's the point we're at right now. Unfortunately, these attorneys have got a pretty good stronghold on the populace because they've got them so dumbed down in so many different ways that they're unable to see these things anymore. And we're really, we're right on the verge of not having the ability to comprehend this as a whole. But let me finish with the, how simple this really is. Either you're going to choose to not harm others and adhere to the public law, or you're going to choose via doctrine of election. Okay, and this occurs anytime you get a marriage license, driver's license, sign a birth certificate, go to the voting polls and register to vote.
Go to the doctor, go to filling out these dentist forms, anything included or involved in the CMS system. Anytime you're diagnosing yourself or taking up a title, that is the crucifixion of Christ. Casting lots, you're taking up titles.
And when you choose these things, you don't really have a voice to complain about who got elected in. Not that it matters anyways, because it's all Congress. They wouldn't be there if they weren't Congress. And if they're not fully indoctrinated into the congressional mentality, by the time they get there, their handlers, which are usually 3 or 4 attorneys that are directly tied in with the Association of Corporate Counsel, they will direct you accordingly. And if you get out of hand, well, just look back at McFadden and Lindbergh, Nancy Schaefer, these folks that didn't fit the mold got their mold broken.
Well, Lindbergh, he was the one that got up on the House floor and he pointed his finger over at J.P. Morgan, the law firm, and he said, that thing is treasonous. That law firm there is treasonous. And so are you, Representative so-and-so, and Representative so-and-so, and Representative so-and-so. And Lindbergh found himself with his dead son at a later time in order to silence him and shut him up.
Now, on the other side of the public law, the other component is accountability for one's actions. And that means no one, I don't care who you are. Work for J.P. Morgan, you are a Congress critter, whatever. If you harm another human being, you can be held accountable under the restrictive principle of sovereign immunity, which means if you harm a human being, then you have no immunity. Now, behind their codes and statutes and stuff, they got limited liability. So you usually can't touch these guys, as we've seen in the past. And it's a built-in, safety mechanism, and it's a catch-22 here because as a citizen, you're not able to. You don't have the ability to go in and hold them accountable under the restricted principle of sovereign immunity.
Right. Under the definition of citizen in Black's Law, you're always subject to the Constitution and the laws of the criminal enterprise. If you're claiming to be a citizen and patronizing it, you're allowing that to happen against your body, and that's what Jesus was against in 1 Corinthians 6. He said you can only fornicate by giving the Lord God your body. You can only fornicate by giving your body over to that thing and allowing it to trick you out. And in the introduction of 1 Corinthians 6, he said, how dare you? What are you doing? For shame. Shame, what are you doing in front of them? Don't you know that you are going to be judging the saints? And that's what this is all about. You're coming into your own authority, and you're not any longer being represented, meaning presented another way. Now, if you go to 16 U.S.C. 7, you'll find that they presented you as a bird to preserve. That stems from Article 1, Section 9, Clauses 1 and 2, where they called you birds. They said you migrated here and were imported.
And after all, you voted for them, so they got the right to represent you any way they want.
Including pre-service. And that's something absolutely horrifying when you go from 16 U.S.C. 7 over to the FDA and the contractual agreements with the Ethics Commission. You find out that the human being through the FDA is a human test subject. Pre-service means that you will be prescribed things or pre-written. The Preservation Act has nothing to do with preserving birds. It has everything to do with using them as human test subjects.
Title 50, 1520A says that they can't conduct all of these biological and warfare experiments on you, unless, of course, it's for the purposes of national security or military.
Right, national security. And this stems from the National Security Act of 1947. And of course, Henry Kissinger came in there in 1974 with his Memorandum 200 to the National Security Council and maintained that depopulation should be the highest priority of all foreign policy. Again, foreign policy means communication between two counties, two corporations. So the corporations have it in for you, the human being. They have it in for you, the law enforcement officer. This is not games. This is reality. Law enforcement has been a tool, and a very, very useful tool of policy in the depopulation schematic.
So when they say in their own words that they can't do this unless it's for a matter of national security, they're telling you, the citizen, that they're going to do this to you. Okay? And everybody's screaming about chemtrails and trying to figure out where those are coming from. Go to grants.gov, search cloud seeding, and you'll see all the funding for this.
And geoengineering. Put in Monsanto. Everybody's screaming about Monsanto being the beast and being a monster. It is given development grants to develop across the globe by none other than Congress. And if you're paying your taxes, if you pay this and tip to it, you're paying Monsanto to develop other countries. You're paying them to develop new GMO technology and new ways of killing you. So it's time to sit back and rethink what is happening and what you're doing, what you're patronizing.
Yeah, absolutely. That's where it all comes down to, is what you are patronizing. What are you being patriotic to? I mean, there are countless patriots out there that want to revert to the quote-unquote organic constitution. It's the same thing. These are the same type of people. This is still Congress back then.
And remember that an organic constitution refers to the human body. Organic?
Yes.
A corporation is not an organic thing. It's a concept. So the human body is filled up with an organic constitution. And at birth, you're born here, you're docked here on the United States Incorporated. They have agreements with France through the treaties by which you're renting this space, and that's the docking instrument. That's the manufacturer's statement of origin, which is the birth record. Describes the height, weight, and circumference of the baby, of the object that's being legally named. And these are attorney terms, legal terms, maintaining that that is now a fiction, but it's an organic fiction. And they're going to fill it up with artificial intelligence through the education program. Education stems from the word pedagogy, meaning attendance on boys. Artificial intelligence is artificial intelligence. It is not relative experience. It is not relative knowledge in any way. It's artificial intelligence. This allows you to be separated from yourselves and each other in all variants. Nomenclature's foundation is to grab things and give it a law. And it stems from the doctrine of Thomas, to name all things down to the smallest iota. So you can be pit apart. I mean, just the male alone. You can be called a male, a man, a father, a dad, an uncle, a worker, whatever else. These things, that's nomenclature. It's describing you in every variant. And those descriptions come along with the rights and benefits that come with concepts. That's what the law merchant is selling you, concepts. And as it steals your rights and makes laws to steal your rights and hold them hostage so you buy them back by action of bail, you're buying concepts. You're eating it up. You are partaking of the tree of knowledge. Partake means to participate, eat, gobble it up. And that's what everybody's doing. They're eating all of these things, partaking of the tree of knowledge. And what happens then? It says it in the Bible that you die. When you take up these names and titles, you're automatically abjuring the realm, and you're within civil death.
That's right. Civil death is what they're talking about there.
Right, and in Revelation it says we're to kill them as they killed us. And that's what happened in this court case. They were declared dead last August because we couldn't find anybody. We wanted a judge there. A judge is bound by judicial canon. It can only view evidence and rule accordingly. Well, we got an attorney in a black dress. So we had no other option after numerous accounts of looking and looking and looking. We had no other option than for the judge to declare them dead. They were missing and lost at sea. They don't know who they are, and they're fictions. And then you take the attorney, it has a fictional government it adheres to, just like it was holding against you, the citizen, and you, the law enforcement official. Now, what you don't know is that in 1929, here comes Congress and all of its cronies and cohorts to implement the 1929 Geneva Convention. And it said, if you should lose your government, corporations will step in and hold you as prisoners of war until you find a new one. Then, 4 years later, they turned around and said, oh, we're bankrupt. Or your government failed, didn't it? You're without a government at that time, and ever since, you've been held as a prisoner of war under corporate governance. And you can read this in the 1929 Geneva Convention.
And of course, that was all a fabrication by Congress, because there was no bankruptcy. They shipped all the gold over to Germany and said, oh, we got no gold. We're bankrupt. Okay, and it was just a mechanism that they used to further your enslavement. Okay, right. You kept voting for this system, consenting, and here we are.
And it's a way of concept design. Concept design is it's hard to explain because it's hard to explain concepts alone and how they rule your life. But concept design, it's more like industrialization. So you build on concepts, and you build on concepts, and you build on concepts. And by 1954, the whole thing was not only a banking schematic, it was a gambling venture. It was a card game. All of this is just a card game, throwing money in the pot. Let's see how much we can bet on this guy. Let's see how much we can bet on that guy. And the insurance schematic alone is, extraordinarily financially beneficial to fiscal policy. And that's what we're in now. Since that treaty with Korea, the Republic of Korea, it's all been under the Gambling Commission. And you can see that when you go into the bank and you deposit money into a certificate of deposit, bet on that prisoner on the other end. And if you lose the interest on those things, you lose. The bank never loses anything. But it's involved in gambling at that point in time. You're betting against the productivity of a prisoner when you deposit into a certificate of deposit. You're betting on its productivity. And when you do that, you're guaranteeing that an FBI agent is going to be poking out there on that person or that human being. It's going to be terrorizing that human being, prompted by corporate counsel. It's going to be stealing that human being's child. It's going to be taking its mother or father off of that human being through the medical industry. It's going to make it produce in order to facilitate that bet.
Yep. I mean, and these cards they're playing with basically are all the laws, codes, and statutes that they're playing with. And then what they're betting on is you.
Right.
And they don't care what happens to you.
Then they have hedged the bet. So if I'm playing blackjack and I see that the dealer has an ace top face, and I don't know what he's got under that ace, but I can insure my bet to decrease my liability. That's called hedging a bet. Municipal hedge funds are hedging a bet on the productivity of mankind.
Yep. So by trick and deception, they got you to go along with this system, and the more you play into it, the more you're helping them put wealth in their pockets and basically perpetuate genocide upon humankind. Absolutely. That's the sick reality of it.
Well, and the sickest thing is that people scream out, like PETA screams out against, dog fighting and cockfighting. Nobody ever says anything about human fighting. The Congress is pitting us against each other. It's like a huge dog fight or a cockfight constantly.
Yeah, and we saw that evidence with Obama's State of the Union address the other night. We was talking about, we got to get these, women equal pay for equal work, and of course he was just admitting there that they'd embezzled all of those funds for that act they passed back in 2009. Right,
the Ledbetter Fair Pay Act.
Yeah,
and that was that was his first one he signed into law back in 2009. And it never did anything. At the State of the Union address, he said again that females on federal employ are being paid 77 cents on the dollar. That means that Congress, who's the Confederate state, is the one limiting her ability and paying her 77 cents on the dollar. Although he got you to believe that it was you. They got you to believe that it was you that was picking on the female. It's always been Congress, congressional action, and of course they pocket all of those funds. When I was attempted on, I was refusing their services, because I'm not going to contract with them. And I tell everybody, a lot how he was made to be festered and everything else. They cashed in on all of those things. And then this guy was criminalized. And of course, for our new listeners, he was a Manchurian candidate. Everything was fine. He's like this 64-year-old doctor that I was helping. He was using my phone inside of my house. I felt comfortable enough that I went to take a bath, and the next thing I know, he's off the phone. He's foaming at the mouth. I've never seen anybody in a rage. I've never experienced anybody in a rage. He was foaming at the mouth and apologizing to me for my death. He was telling me as he was beating my head, and you were such a good woman. You were such a good friend. And in this, because he was apologizing and he didn't really want to kill me, the only logical explanation is that he was being forced into something that he didn't want to do by force behind him. There was something in his background that they had to have held against him, or maybe they threatened his family or whatever else. But, a murderer normally wouldn't be apologizing to somebody for their death. They want to murder, otherwise they wouldn't be doing that. And, going through that experience was profound enough, because I had gone up against the sheriff out there in Stevens County, and I was up against the FBI. I was so pissed off at, here's the mayor and two sheriffs were charged with pedophilia at that time with the Boys Ranch. The mayor eventually dies. That was when Mayor West was in office. Sheriff, I forgot their names now, but one of the sheriffs supposedly shot himself in the head and killed himself. But then that other sheriff, the pedophile that was charged and found guilty of pedophilia, was transported and moved 50 miles north to Deer Lake to be at the Salvation Army youth camp and Camp Gifford, which was 3 miles south of me. So I was raising hell, and here, of course I get somebody sicked upon me because, I was such an interference in their schematic, their banking schematic, using children. And, I wouldn't have believed it if I hadn't witnessed it with my own eyes. I had heard at that point in time, the Manchurian candidate, and as a psychologist, I never imagined that the amount of psychological construct could be used against a human being, and those things in my mind way back then were conspiracy theories until I experienced it myself. And then, of course, we saw it in the media just a little while back when the sheriff, ex-sheriff, shot that man in the theater.
Yeah.
He went out.
And then he had pizza afterwards.
Right. He was fine. Everything was de-escalating.
I'm sorry. That wasn't him. That was the guy that shot the kid in the car playing loud music. My mistake. Right.
But these things are not normal occurrences. It was de-escalating. The sheriff's official had walked out of the theater to de-escalate, which is normal for anybody to do if you're ticked off or whatever. And, of course, he was on the phone. Now, who was he on the phone with? Was he on the phone with his handler? Because ultimately he came back into the theater and shot that guy, and then he sat there dumbfounded with his hands and gun in his lap as if he didn't realize until that moment what was done. So something occurred in between this time and this time. What happened in between there? Because at this time the media is still vilifying him, but who was his handler? Who told him those things? Who did whatever to his mind to allow him to do that and then kind of wake up out of a daze and realize that he just killed somebody?
Yeah, they've been working on this method of controlling human beings for 50, 60, 70 years. I mean, they've got the drug cocktail down to a science. They've got the wordplay and Pavlovian theory that they apply on you down to a science, and it's more than just a random occurrence when these things happen, and we see them in all of these shootings, like the Colorado Aurora shooting. That guy, he had no idea where he was.
Right, and it was the same thing with the children. Columbine, since that experience as well, all of the survivors have been killed or criminalized. They're just being used as human capital.
Product,
human capital.
Now, it was interesting in that one story I was reading about, one of the stories I covered earlier in my YouTube video about the arrests, that the judge says that they're going to produce him for court appearance. Okay? They use that word produce. I thought it was interesting. To dig up that story in a moment here.
You probably have the links. I was going to cover another one for all law enforcement because as I've maintained over and over again, law enforcement is usually in law enforcement because they're protecting humanity, or they believe they're protecting humanity. Now here's one. Toddler badly beaten. Reserve police officer arrested. This is 2 days ago in Sheridan, Oregon. A reserve police officer with the city of Yamhill has been arrested and accused of severe child abuse. He's now facing major 11 assault charges. Police said Michael Shane Abbo, 29, is believed to be responsible for serious injuries inflicted upon his girlfriend's 4-year-old son. The boy is currently at OHSU listed in critical condition. He was taken there by a Life Flight helicopter January 1st. Yamhill County Sheriff's Office deputies responded to Abbo's home on Evans Street in Yamhill on New Year's Day after medical personnel were called to the scene. Once it was realized that Abbo, who was also a former county deputy, may have been connected to the incident, McMinnville police detectives were brought in to primarily handle the investigation. Now remember, these detectives are trained at Quantico. Abbo was arrested without incident at his home early Saturday morning and booked into the Yamhill County Jail. Abbo is facing charges that include 2 counts of major 11 assault and 2 counts of criminal mistreatment. His bail is set at $1 million. Now again, assault. Now this is adhering to the public law. Prior to this, it would have been considered domestic violence or some other conceptualized statute play. However, since we won a case against them, they can no longer use the Crimes Against Children Act, which is a privacy law by which to abuse children. Now, of course, the level of evidence required to maintain the charge or cause, first cause, is required, of course, and that is harm against a human being. And it's very interesting to see all of these things occurring, and you know, it's overwhelming at times to see that they're actually charging for harm against a human being now, rather than all of these different schematics by which to line the pocket of attorneys and judges and law enforcement and everything else. Because the bottom line is, with harm, you have to prove or evidence harm with evidence. You can't prove harm with, you know, and that's one of my pet peeves is under the domestic violence statutes. For example, I as a female could call into law enforcement and report that you beat my head in, you know, and law enforcement would come out and take a police report from me, from my mouth. And then that police report would be used in court as an expert witness. How is that possible? Because it's still based on my testimony. So even if I'm falsely accusing you or whatever, that police report, that CPS report, any report other than a witness account or evidence is still hearsay. And it's been maintained in the mind that these things are expert witnesses or expert something, when in reality they're based on my first initial testimony. And it depends whether or not I'm a liar, if I'm going to tell the truth as to the relative evidentiary aspect of those things. I mean, it's absolutely horrifying what they've done since the 1938 stare decisis. They've been stacking consensus and stacking this new truth for so long now. This is called consensus reality, if anybody wants to look that up. You can see how the courts are mechanized to maintain consensus reality. You can look that up. It's called consensus creation. This is all part of the Delphi technique. In the school, it's called the Alinsky method. And this is all to maintain this society as we know it today. This modified version of human being that's become so politically correct and efficient for the production of politics, which means that it's so far outside of itself, so far removed from reality and relativity, that it can be easily manipulated by economics. Eco means home, nomics means law. Those are laws of the home. This is how you're moved around through the Department of Transportation, by economic influence. And for any law enforcement out there that's listening, human beings have been targeted by the psychopath and maintained under low-intensity conflict for so long, and fourth-generation warfare, asymmetrical warfare. They're not able to be realizant of what is real and what is not real, and they have no idea these pressures behind them until now. Now they know who's perpetrating what, who's doing what, and who's directing this. And hopefully I pray that our listeners are fully aware of the innocence of the majority of law enforcement and the abhorrent nature of the attorney or the attorney, because that's the bottom line. We've got Satan handling law enforcement, and that's not a good thing.
Yeah, and we have these police officers that have been programmed to believe that the attorneys know the law. Yeah, they know their codes and statutes about commercial crimes, private acts, and acts of commerce. Okay? They are completely 180 degrees opposite of the public law, though, which says to do no harm.
Absolutely, because they are the banks.
Yeah, they're about renting you out.
Yes, and the court is the bank. The attorney oath, you can find that in 12 U.S. Code, which is a banking code, subsection 73. And you can find that they're taking an oath that they are not hypothecated so that they can hypothecate the human being. And hypothecation is very hard to explain. It's the action of taking a human being into a court or other foundling hospital, such as a hospital setting, and altering its composition to be a negotiable instrument in some way. And this is described by the letter A in Black's Law Dictionary. If you have any kind of copy of Black's Law, the letter A tells you what this is. But the hypothecation is the ability of them to take a real thing and turn it into something that is a concept. A negotiable instrument, of course, is a concept.
Yep, and so here we have these police officers, marshals, agents, etc., buying into all these concepts. Of course, that's their employment. Okay, so they've got psychological pressure on them there, economical pressure on them, to adhere to this system. Even though we see, like, with your plea for help to the U.S. Marshals before you were evicted by sheriffs following a void order from a rogue judge.
Bank, yes.
Even though we see Rocko's situation now, where they're executing on a void order from this Mary Kay Wagner.
Right.
They're useful idiots, and then when this all comes down, they'll take the heat for it, not the parties behind the curtains.
Right, and that's what it says in Matthew 27. All of a sudden, Judas, so the one with law, the one law enforcement, he comes in there and he hands his paycheck back to the chief priests and elders, which is corporate council, and he says, oh my God, I had no idea what I was doing. Well, guess what happened then? They cannibalized him. He didn't hang himself like committing suicide physically. He hung himself politically by handing his paycheck back to his handlers and saying, oh, I'm out of here. I just found out that you're a pedophile and I'm gone. And what happens? The attorney is the one with the control of the local media. The attorneys, the board of directors are the controllers of the media. And so, like this guy that's been charged now with assault, that's political cannibalism usually. Law enforcement, I know my oldest wanted to go in law enforcement for so long, you know, and she just wanted to help human beings. You know, and going back to, you know, you were talking about the economic pressure on these cops and everything else. There's also political pressure.
Right.
These babies.
They're experiencing the pressures of meta soma veta just like everybody else because they're prisoners of war.
Absolutely.
Same thing.
And the push, you know, my oldest wanted to be a cop. Her push was lacking that father figure. My husband was killed in 2000. And, you know, not having that father figure, she's seeking a father figure. By the time she was like 11, she wanted to go in the military. You know, it's always the same. So, and it's the same for these law enforcement officials. They were raised of a single mom, or they had a two-family household, or whatever happened, but the father is usually missing. And this child is picked on in school, and it doesn't fit in. And especially the males. The males under feminism are vilified so bad, so they're taught, you're bad, you're bad, you're bad, you're bad, you're bad, you're bad, you're bad. So the males start seeking to be good. And one of those ways is to become law enforcement. I'm a good boy. I'm going to prove that I'm good. And that is the easiest mechanism by which to prey on you. Because under fourth generation warfare, they know your background. They know when they called you bad. They know when you were in juvenile justice. And they use this against you. This is the force behind your actions. Now, drop all of that. And this is directed right at law enforcement. Drop all of those concepts. If you have never, ever harmed a human being, you're absolutely innocent. There is nothing wrong with you. They require you to have low IQs because it makes it easier to puppet you. You're not stupid. You're just indoctrinated differently than others. Divest yourself of all that possesses you, is what Jesus said. Take that all away. Just get rid of it. Stop feeling that shame when you haven't done anything wrong. That is number one. Stop seeking a title, number two. You already are. Before somebody gives you a reward, that means your award again, by the way. Before somebody gives you a sticker or a star or a commendation, you already are. And what you're doing is seeking to be. That's buying their concepts and allowing you to be tricked out by corporate policy.
It's a sticky situation that you're in. I feel for all of you in this situation out there trying to feed your families, you know, for the ones that are innocent. Those are the meek that shall inherit the earth. Those are the law enforcement that will remain, because law enforcement is not going away. It's just going to shift to adhering to the public law. And that means these people like executives of TEPCO, BP, the ones that are causing horrendous, just massive amounts of horrendous harm upon humanity, they're not going to skate away with their limited liability insurance and corporate attorneys protecting them.
Now remember, law enforcement, that the U.S. Incorporated, USA, Congress, Senate, House of Representatives, they've been found guilty of genocide by the evidence. The majority of you now have that order. You have that bond. And all you have to do is make your choice. Are you going to work for the corporation, or are you going to work for yourself and humanity? No. Now, we've had a lot of questions on that bond because it says that law enforcement or the sheriff shall have access to revenue, assets and revenue. Now, prior to this, the federal mandate was that you get 7% of the local bond amount. So say you bond somebody out for $1,000, you were getting 7% of that, while the rest went into their coffers. Congress ultimately was taking 90%. off the top, giving these local communities nothing, 10%, and then you were getting 10% of less than 1% of everything. Now, as the sheriff, the word sheriff means steward of humanity, and you were given 10% of all assets and revenue on top of $6,000 lawful dollars per month for your facility. And what that is, what did that come out to? $6,000 per month in lawful money is 6,000 1-ounce gold coins, basically.
Yeah, so multiply that by 1,400 or whatever today's gold value is.
Right, and that's the amount that you're getting. And then the other 90% goes to humanity. And so that maintains that you, law enforcement, are maintaining as the treasury on behalf of humanity, because what the federal state had done is it came in to shut up the kingdom of heaven. They were taking 90% out of the treasury, taking 90% from the national states, and humanity has been getting nothing. Corporations have been maintaining on corporate welfare all this time. Now, law enforcement, this is your opportunity to be actual stewards of humanity without anything shutting up our kingdom. That is what that story is all about. That is what Jesus was maintaining. You're shut up the kingdom of God. That is any confederated state, any criminal enterprise doing what Congress has done for so long now to raise humanity, R-A-Z-E, and burn it to the ground.
Yeah, and if you can wrap your mind around that upholding the public law is above any code or statute, then I would say that you're already twice as intelligent as the average attorney.
And you have to realize that you already are. You know, in the beginning, God gives us senses. We have all of these senses. And basically what we have the senses for is if it hurts, don't do that. That's it. I mean, that's activity you require. You don't require concept development. You don't require to be part of the Pyongyang project. You don't require to, be devolving based on your educational experience. You require simply relativity.
Now, we've seen tons of stories about police being held accountable, judges, attorneys, agents, clerks, okay? But here's the writing on the wall, and the 4 bankers now. I guess 4 bankers have committed suicide, so there's something going on there. But here's the writing on the wall for the higher-ups. In Pennsylvania, Representative J.P. Miranda of Philadelphia has been charged in a corruption scheme to funnel money to his sister, the city's district attorney announced on Monday.
You must have missed the first part of the show.
Yeah, I did. I'm sorry. Yeah, PA lawmaker charged with corruption scheme to secretly pay his sister, says the district attorney.
Yeah.
So this is the millstone being wrapped around their neck now, the dead burying the dead. Okay, just to revisit that, though, I'm saying this is the writing on the wall. This is not a, occurrence that's going to subside in any way, because that agreed entry with Northern Holding Corporation stands. It's the only lawful way to handle the situation. So, yeah, there's going to be a lot of fallout, and we see people dragging their feet now, like is being done with Rocko there in McHenry County.
I think they feel like their hands are tied right now. I mean, I'm trying to, let them know. All I want is that order.
All they got to do is look at the previous evidence, and they'll see that this is a void order that has been, manufactured.
Yep. All I want is the order. I want evidence in the United States court to maintain who did this. And I know that it's hard to roll on your peers.
Well, they're going to roll on you.
Absolutely, and it says that in Matthew 27. And I urge everybody to read this case.
That's why this district attorney is jumping into action in Pennsylvania, because he wants to roll on him before he gets rolled on.
Right, those are the rules of politics. And, of course, the most profound was, when they started going after Governor Christie, because here's Pilot being rolled on even. From the Examiner.com, Hawkins County judge arrests court clerk, retired judge defends her. Hawkins County Sessions Court, Judge J. Todd Ross had the clerk of courts, Sarah Davis, arrested on contempt of court charges on January 30th for refusing to send a member of her staff to do collections in the courtroom. And these are, again, the banking aspect. The clerk is actually a window of exchange. She's the one that's exchanging human beings into negotiable instruments. The definition of court is, of course, the bank. And what you see as these bank buildings and everything, those are just representations. J.P. Morgan was a law firm prior to becoming a bank with the Emergency Banking Acts and related gameplay brought forth by, of course, Congress. And you can read this in the Congressional Record. Let me go get that real quick, and I'll tell you where to find it.
And these people buying into this OPC, just stop and look like who's behind it, an attorney, and think twice about that road, will you?
Right. Now, this is located in the Charles Lindbergh Sr. Congressional Record, February 12, 1917. Congressional Record, February 12, 1917. Charles A. Lindbergh Sr. Articles of Impeachment against U.S. Federal Reserve Board, pages 3126 through 3130. And, we don't have a lot of time left tonight, but I urge everybody to read this. Maybe I'll read it after hours or something so that everybody can realize, why was his
come
son...
back Saturday, and you're on 6 to 8 on this same Studio B Freedom Slips.
Right.
6 to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Right. And we'll be here on Saturday, and of course next week, Bo and Rocko Show on Wednesday, 10 to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Studio A. And everybody else, Revolution Radio is like the best station out there, in my opinion. I listen to a lot of the other hosts as I have time as well, and here we are with the truth right in your face, and I'm thankful for the listener support.
Yeah, we don't have a constitutional attorney every top of the hour break.
Yeah, that was so sad to realize these things, and of course the attorneys really upping the ante with the commercialization and doing their own commercials. I know over the Super Bowl that one spent a lot of money. Oh my God,
that's over the top, isn't it? The commercial for that attorney, my God. No, he's not Satan or anything.
No, and that's the first thing that came to my mind is Satan. Oh my God, Satan is asking God to forgive him now. He says he's not going to be a bad attorney anymore. He's going to be a good attorney now. And
which is an oxymoron.
Absolutely. A turn is a two, a turn is
two. If you're human trafficking, there's no redemption for you.
Well, you look at the initial oath. When you take an oath to another government, and not one to, serve you or yourself or your family or your community, that's a major red flag right there. Here's an attorney, and their oath is, I demean myself as an attorney. And once they take that oath, and then the next part of the attorney oath says, as long as I'm a citizen of thereof. Well, once they did that oath to the Bar Association, they were no longer a United States citizen, and that's where we come into the Title 12 Banking Code, 12 U.S.C. subsection 73, and that's what that is. They're not a citizen. They're not hypothecated. Only a natural person can be a surety, and you can find this in the statutes.
Say thanks for having me, Tammy. Everybody out there, support the station. Keep us on the air. We'll see you back next Wednesday. Tammy is on 6 to 8 on Saturday.